Entrepreneurs are a class of their own. They find something, they try to develop it, and if it doesn't work out, they pivot. They use it as a stepping stone for growth. Barry Zolty is a serial entrepreneur. This week on Jewish Grit, listen to the story of his success. Barry, we'd like to get to know you a little bit better. Let our viewers understand who Barry Zolty is. Why don't you start by sharing in 60 to 90 seconds a little bit about your personal life. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? A little bit about your family, if you're comfortable doing that.
Sure. I grew up in Toronto, Canada. I got married in 2005, lived in Israel for about 2 years, and then moved back to Lakewood, New Jersey.
Even after you got married, you were studying Torah. And then you pick yourself up and you moved back to
Lakewood. Yeah, we were expecting our second child, and we felt that maybe this is a good time to consider how we're going to support the family.
Okay, great. So you moved back to Lakewood?
I moved back to Lakewood.
And right away you entered the professional world?
So pretty much.
Now, did you go to college at all?
I did not go to college.
Wow, you're not
but
the
I
only
did.
guy.
Yeah, what's interesting is that one of the things I did was actually arrange for people to get college degrees. That's one of my little businesses. Is so I didn't have a proper college degree. I mean, I had a Talmudic degree,
Right.
which is obviously very valuable.
For sure.
But I did assist people in getting their MBAs, or I ran a nursing cohort for women in Lakewood to get their nursing degrees. That was I did that for a stint. I guess I would consider myself an entrepreneur by nature.
Okay.
I started multiple businesses, failed at many businesses, and was successful at many businesses. I guess the one career or one business that I did have was a newspaper distribution business in Lakewood. I started a business from scratch, and it grew pretty large in Lakewood. Ultimately, I sold that business, so we were quite successful. That was a lot of hard work and a lot of warehouse work as well, but negotiating with clients and stuff like that. So
Is it still in existence?
it's still in existence,
Okay.
and it's actually with the growth of Lakewood. The growth of Lakewood alone kind of contributes to the success of the company. So eventually, I mean, there's a couple businesses in between, but I did have a friend who I was introduced by a rabbi of mine from Detroit. So I didn't actually spend time in yeshiva with him, but he was referred to like a mutual rebbe. He came to my office one day and looking for a career. And I set him up with something I was doing at the time was ball bearings. My father-in-law was doing ball bearing distribution, and I kind of came up with a unique, way to reach the markets and stuff. So I did that for some time, kind of elevated his business. But I brought this guy along, my friend Sam, and he went out to different markets. He actually, a salesman, traveling salesman, and he did really nicely for that, but it was short-lived, and we obviously kept up and used to come by my office. And just the backstory is that my family is in the real estate business in Toronto. But so they were in the real estate business, and I was kind of on my own, trying to hustle things out,
Right.
and try figuring things out. But anyways, in this distribution business, I used to meet this friend Sam, and there's actually a good hashkacha story, hashkacha pratis, divine providence
Yeah.
story, where he received a expensive cigar from a client, and he had nothing to do with it because he doesn't smoke cheap cigars either. So he says, "Barry, you want to come over for a cigar?" I'm like, "Sure." Is it good? Whatever. I went to his house, and we've chatted in the past about business and stuff, but at that point, we had this conversation. He was frustrated with being on the lending side of the real estate business and, certain things in that business. And he just, I really wanted to get on the other side of the business. I really want to, buy stuff. And I guess he needed some encouragement and some, background. And I did have, some business background and, come from a, real estate family. And over that cigar, I said, "You know what, Sam, let's do this. Let's do this," I guess I am pretty spontaneous, and I would say there was things that were going on in my business that I wasn't excited about, mainly that it was just, it was just being successful and nothing more,
Right.
and as an entrepreneur, I like starting up, I like new things, I like, change. So it was just this great opportunity, and it just kind of, in some ways it fell on my lap, but if you kind of look at the whole story, how things kind of came together, it was pretty amazing. So we started this real estate company, myself, Sam, and a third partner, Aaron. And we started that business in 2017. I used proceeds from the sale of my business as a launching tool for us. Yep. And we actually started. Our office was in my warehouse office. That's where we started. That was our first Brentwood Investment Group office until we moved out and grew our portfolio.
Very nice. So are you doing multifamily now?
Yeah, it's pretty much multifamily. And most of our real estate is in actually Virginia, but then we got in Texas and Tennessee and some other markets.
Why don't you share with us, if you're comfortable doing so, like what your typical day looks like? How much do you dedicate each day to your professional life? How much to your personal growth, to your spiritual growth? Like, what do you do on a typical day?
Okay, so my schedule changes often, but right now the way it looks typically, and I'm always tinkering with it.
Okay.
So yeah, on a typical day, I daven at 7. Then I have a chavrusa after davening. A study buddy for like an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
what do you guys study?
We study Gemara, Talmud.
Oh, okay.
We study Talmud, and the style that I chose with this particular study buddy was moving.
Covering ground.
Covering ground.
Okay.
Covering ground.
The high that you get when you accomplish and understand, it's like better. I've never done real estate deal in my life, and I'm assuming that when you get a really good deal and I don't know, it's sure there's some type of high.
Yeah, it's
and it's comparable, maybe even better. I don't know. You tell us.
You know what? I think it's an age thing. So I know that when I was younger, certain things would make me more excited, and now that I'm older, and wiser. For me, it's really getting into like God's work. That's what it is. It's dabbling in God stuff, right? And that's the part that just makes us like, hey, I tapped into something that some really great people have. I'm just tapping in such a tiny amount, but it's really that's I think what the highlight is.
And what's your typical work day like? How long do you spend in the office?
I'm like all over the place but I'll come into the office at 10 or so after the day of the week that I work out. It's going to be in the morning after the study buddy, and then I'll come in at 10 or so, and then I'll either leave at 4, 5, 6, or 7, depending on what's going on. It depends on how much it's needed of me, and it shifts with what's going on in the market and what we have going on. We're the business itself. I've learned to delegate a lot, so there's a lot of pluses in delegation. I would say the minus is that sometimes you kind of trying to figure out where you're going to do. If everybody else is doing everything and the market is a little slower, what do you do? So you got to pivot and figure out, where you're most valuable and stuff like that.
Fortunately, you're a lucky man. You have 8 children. How do you balance, running your business, studying, going to the gym? How do you balance that? It's challenging.
It is challenging.
And a wife.
And a wife. Yeah. So she's a great partner.
Okay, great.
She's a wonderful partner with me, and so she definitely does put maybe more of the work than I do. But I pride myself on being a great dad, and for some reason, the more things that are on my plate, the more I'm able to give. I don't know. It's just this weird thing that I would never imagine that I would have enough time in the day to give each child the attention. And there's so many other things that are going on in my life too. I'm home. I'm there. Sundays I'm home, except when I got to come out for.
Sorry, I took away from your family.
Things like this. But we do a lot. We go. I travel with the kids. I take my boys up this year. Took my girls too. We go skiing a lot. Where we do a couple ski trips a year. We're constantly on the go. We're constantly spending time with the kids. The balancing act is in 2025. You can do a lot of work on the road. You don't always have to be in the office, which is really nice. And it just works. There is a tremendous amount of responsibility. Sometimes responsibility doesn't translate into amount of minutes worked, but it's more about what you're dealing with and decisions that you need to make and the people you need to support and your employees and staff and everything else like that.
Do you have a mentor? Is there someone in your life that you go to when you're just not sure how to do it yourself, or just when you need another perspective?
Yes. There isn't a single mentor in my life, but I have learned how to draw on other people. I would say my wife is the one that I turn to most. Not necessarily when it comes to business, right. Specific business things, but, interpersonal kind of things and perspective, just gaining perspective. It's always great. And I have the rabbis I've collected over the years. my business partners as well. I feel like I've built kind of a Rolodex of different people in my life where I can draw on, for specific things. So I wouldn't say I'm all set with that. There is that sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, what do I do here?
Right.
But I have collected. My parents are people in my life who I can draw on.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
At this age, a person who can still go to their parents and say, hey, they do have life wisdom.
Yep.
It's a little counterculture for the American society or even Canadian society, but hey, good
Yeah.
for you. 2 points. We talked to a lot of different people, and I like to hear some people's personal challenges if they're willing to share. Like, if you could think of a particular challenge that you're willing to be open about and kind of how you worked it through and kind of came out on top.
I think what I touched on before is, my entrepreneurial spirit and the need from a nature perspective to always be busy and always feeling like I'm doing something. One of the things that I feel like I shifted more out of, I wouldn't say completely, it's about like my identity with my career and things like that. I think there's like a point in my career where my career and what I did for a living or what do I do for a living is so much part of my identity. And therefore, if I'm bored, as the breadwinner, and even if I'm making money, but it becomes like, hey, am I making enough money? Am I, yes, I'm very happy, but there's all those feelings that I think a lot of people share. But, so for me, it's the transition of, what is my identity? Who is Dobie? Hey, how are you? What do you do for a living? Like at this point, what do I do for a living it's just a small part of me. It's a small part of my identity. So I guess between, identity shift, as well as learning how to pivot when there's a lot of delegation and tremendous amount of things that I could do, but choosing which things to do, what to focus, where am I going to find the most value, and not just how am I going to make the most money, but how am I going to feel the best, and what are my contributions to society look like, yada, yada, yada.
Our audience is, predominantly young professionals just starting their career. What's the best piece of advice that you'd give somebody who's 24, 25, 28 years old, just kind of getting into the workforce in a real way, trying to figure out the next steps? What's something that could really help them?
I would say there's a misconception that people are looking for the right career. They're looking for titles and looking for, okay, that position, I know a guy that does this, that makes a lot of money. So the focus is on the title and what what kind of income is available in that. And I think the shift for people can be to work on their own self-growth, to invest in themselves as much as they can. It doesn't matter what you do. It's a matter of how you grow through what you're doing. Opportunities come. In my life, opportunities kind of came, and I was able to jump on those opportunities. But while those opportunities were coming down the road, I was constantly working on myself, working on how I can be a better person, how I can be a better businessman, how I can be, right? I did newspaper distribution, right? But I tried to be the best I can at that. I'm an entrepreneur. I never worked for somebody, in my life, so I don't have that experience. But I did a lot of career counseling too, and one of the things that I, shared with a lot of people, and just take, it isn't rocket science about what career you choose. Choose whatever is available at this point. That you don't want something dead end, whatever. We're not getting into the details, but the idea is to find something and become the best at it and create value in yourself. And once you create value in yourself, the opportunities are endless.
This show is called Jewish Grit. I want to focus on the Jewish for a minute, put the grit
Okay.
away. So as a Jewish person, you live in a world around us, the United States and Canada. What's the thing that makes you most proud to be a Jew?
A lot makes me proud, especially when people might think this is the time to maybe not be proud or maybe more fearful. But it kind of brings out the pride, right? The Jewish pride. But I would think that the one thing that, especially in my career and in my life, I would say the fact that Judaism has a blueprint for life. It is something that is so important for me, and it's such a relief. We're faced with so much non-truths. There's so many lies out there, whether it's media or just the global in the world. Sometimes it's, when you're the one that's trying to decide what's correct or what's morally right, or it's very confusing. And as you see, but when you have a blueprint of how to live, and you can always come back, you always can ground yourself with that blueprint out of the Torah. Yeah, that to me is something that I'm just immensely grateful for. It takes a lot of the pressure out of your brain. I know how I'm operating my business. I know the principles that I stand by are principles rooted in the Torah. Thousands of years tried, tested, and true. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to second guess myself when it comes to being honest in business. It isn't just a virtue because it's in style, and I may get arrested, or I may, right? It doesn't come down to that. It comes because this is a principal value that's rooted in the blueprint of my life. So I would say that makes me the most proud.
That's a beautiful thought. And it's a world with a lot of murkiness, and having clarity and having your values straight is amazing. It's been a pleasure talking. I'd love to hear more. Wish you continued success and hatzlacha, and hope that however your definition of success is,
Thank you.
Keep coming back to that.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Jewish Grit, an Olami Mentorship podcast. At Olami Mentorship, we believe that everyone needs a mentor. What better way is there to tap into your personal and professional potential than with a Jewish mentor at your side? Learn more at olami.org/mentorship. Don't forget to keep listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.